Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to, well, take what you need to know and make it something you do know fast.
Exactly. And today, you brought us just a title, but wow, what a title.
It really is. It hits hard, doesn't it? Tackle something huge.
Yeah.
This challenge of ongoing financial difficulty.
Yeah, breaking the cycle of financial struggle. I mean, just the title itself promises so much, a diagnosis and hopefully a way out.
Right. It promises we're not just talking about, a rough patch. This is about something more systemic, more ingrained.
The full title is Breaking the Cycle of Financial Struggle: Why Some People Always Struggle Financially and How to Break the Cycle.
So our mission today is a bit different. We don't have the actual text, the chapters, the details.
No, we don't.
But we have this promise, this blueprint laid out in the title and subtitle. So we're going to kind of reverse engineer it. What must this source argue to actually deliver on that title?
That's a great way to put it. We're looking at the framework the author committed to. You see it right there.
Yeah.
The why, then the how.
It's a direct structure. Analyze the causes, then offer solutions. Real intervention points.
Exactly. And just by understanding the questions this title forces the author to ask, we can get a pretty good sense of what the core issues and maybe the solutions are likely to be.
Okay, let's unpack that blueprint then, starting with the first part, the diagnosis. Why some people always struggle financially.
That word always, that's the kicker, isn't it?
It really stands out. It immediately says this isn't just bad luck or a temporary thing.
Right. It points towards something cyclical, something persistent, reinforced even.
So if this source, whatever it is going to be credible, it can't just blame individuals, can it?
No way. The word always forces a broader view. It suggests, well, at least three big pathways that likely feed into each other, creating this loop.
Okay, what are they?
Well, first you'd have to look at the individual level, sure, but maybe more the psychological cost, not just decisions.
Okay. Individual and psychological. What else?
Second, you absolutely have to talk about systemic stuff, structural barriers, the big picture things.
Makes sense. And third,
how this stuff gets passed down, the intergenerational aspect, how struggle in one generation can set the stage for the next.
Right. Okay, let's dig into that first one, the individual track. When this topic comes up, people often jump to like, oh, they just need better financial literacy or they make bad choices.
Yeah, that's the common sort of surface level take.
Yeah.
But if the source is digging deeper, especially with that word always, it has to go beyond just lack of knowledge.
To what then?
To something like decision fatigue, or what researchers call cognitive bandwidth.
Cognitive bandwidth. Explain that a bit.
Sure. Think of your brain like a computer's RAM, right?
Yeah.
Your processing power. If you're constantly desperately worried about basic survival, rent, food, keeping the lights on, maybe juggling two jobs, all those urgent worries are like background programs eating up all your mental processing power. There's just less capacity left for complex, future-oriented thinking.
Like budgeting for next year or figuring out an investment.
Exactly. It's not that you don't know how to budget, maybe. It's that your brain is screaming about getting gas money for tomorrow. The immediate crisis just overrides everything else.
So the sheer psychological pressure of being in financial stress makes it harder to escape financial stress.
Precisely. It's a vicious cycle right there. You're constantly fighting fires, so you never get the mental space or energy to actually build the fireproof house. That's one way you get always struggling.
Okay, that makes sense. That covers the individual, but maybe from a different angle. What about the second track? Systemic barriers.
Right. This is where we zoom out. Is it the person? Or is the environment, the game itself, making it incredibly difficult?
The nature versus nurture of finance, sort of?
Kind of, yeah. A good source here has to look at things like wages not keeping up with costs for decades. Housing, healthcare, childcare. The costs for basic necessities have exploded in many places.
Well, wages have stayed pretty flat for a lot of people.
Exactly. So no matter how carefully you budget, if the basic math doesn't add up, if income is fundamentally lower than essential expenses, you're going to struggle. That's systemic.
And it forces choices that look bad from the outside, right?
Totally. Like maybe you can't afford the $100 preventative car maintenance. So you skip it, then the car breaks down completely, costs $1,000 you don't have, and maybe you lose your job.
Or using a high-interest payday loan because the bank won't give you credit. It seems irrational long-term.
But it might be the only rational choice to keep the lights on tonight. The system presents you with a set of bad, high-cost options, and you're forced to pick the least worst one, which often digs the hole deeper.
So the source needs to identify those systemic traps, those points where a small problem becomes a catastrophe because the safety nets aren't there or aren't accessible.
Yes. It has to address the structure of the economy, credit systems, lack of affordable options, all those external pressures.
Okay. And the third track, intergenerational. How does that fit in?
Well, cycles, by definition, repeat. And often, they repeat across generations.
So it's not just about inheriting money or lack of it.
No, it's much broader. It's about maybe not inheriting the knowledge of how to navigate complex financial systems, like mortgages, investments, even taxes.
Or the social capital, the networks that help people find better jobs.
Exactly that. Plus, remember that cognitive bandwidth issue. Growing up in a household with constant financial stress, that chronic stress can impact a child's development, their own stress responses, their ability to plan long-term.
Wow, so the psychological effects can actually be passed down too, reinforcing the cycle for the next generation.
It seems plausible based on research into childhood adversity. So putting it all together, the why part of this title is implicitly promising a pretty complex analysis.
It has to be. It needs to connect the dots between the psychological load of poverty, the systemic or structural disadvantages, and how these things are potentially transmitted across generations.
Right. It's a three-legged stool of causation, if you like. Each leg supports the others.
Okay, that's a really thorough diagnosis implied by just half the title. Now the hopeful part. And how to break the cycle.
Yeah, the prescription. If the diagnosis is that complex and interconnected,
then the solution can't be simple, right? It can't just be try harder or budget better.
Absolutely not. Breaking the cycle implies something more fundamental. High-leverage interventions. Things powerful enough to actually disrupt those reinforcing loops we talked about.
So where would you start? If the problems are systemic, maybe the solutions need to be systemic too.
That seems logical. If wages are too low or the cost of living is crushing, you need large-scale policy ideas. Things that change the basic economic environment.
Like what, potentially? What might a source like this propose?
Well, it might get into things like, say, guaranteed basic income ideas, GBI.
GBI, explain that quickly.
Sure. It's basically the idea of regular, unconditional cash payments from the government to everyone, or maybe targeted groups, to ensure a basic floor, a minimum standard of living.
The idea being?
The idea being, it directly tackles that core problem of just not having enough money for basics, and it frees up that cognitive bandwidth we discussed. If you're not panicked about rent, maybe you can think about the future.
That's a huge idea, obviously. Lots of debate around feasibility, cost, effects.
Of course. But if the promise is to break the cycle, you kind of have to consider these big structural shifts. Maybe targeted debt relief, too.
Debt relief, like for medical debt or student loans.
Exactly. Those often act like huge anchors, right? Holding people back for years, decades even. Wiping out or restructuring that kind of debt could instantly free up resources, both financial and mental.
So structural fixes aim to change the environment, make the ground more solid under people's feet?
Yes. So individual effort has a fighting chance.
But you can't just do policy, right? We talked about the individual and psychological tracks. What are the high leverage points there?
Good question. This is where you look at, well, the friction in the system and the psychology.
Friction.
Yeah, like how hard is it to actually get help? If applying for benefits means taking a day off work you can't afford, navigating impossible forms, waiting in lines, that's friction. It punishes the people who need help most.
So the intervention is simplification, making systems easier to use, automation.
Precisely. Reducing the bureaucratic burden. That's a huge, often overlooked intervention. Making aid accessible is as vital as the aid itself.
What about the behavioral side? Financial literacy classes often get mentioned, but the results seem mixed.
They're often mixed.
Yeah.
Maybe because abstract knowledge given months or years before you need it isn't that helpful when you're stressed.
So what works better, potentially?
The source might suggest something like just-in-time education or contextualized support. Meaning you get the specific financial information or coaching at the exact moment you need it. Like when you're actually applying for a mortgage, that's when a clear, simple explanation of escrow or points is most powerful, not in a generic class 6 months ago.
Okay. So integrate the learning directly into the financial action itself.
Yeah. It's like putting the right tool in someone's hand right when they're trying to turn the screw, instead of just giving them a toolbox manual beforehand.
And what about the stress? The shame that often comes with financial struggle?
That's crucial. Effective interventions there might involve community support groups, peer mentoring, non-judgmental financial coaching. things that reduce the isolation and emotional burden.
Right. So people feel empowered to actually use the new opportunities or stability that might come from structural changes.
Exactly. It all has to work together. Policy shifts create opportunity, reduced friction makes it accessible, and psychological community support helps people actually seize it.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together. Just from analyzing the title and subtitle, we've sort of reverse engineered a potential argument.
Yeah, a plausible structure emerges. It suggests the source intends to show how financial struggle is driven by this interconnected trio: psychological burdens, systemic barriers, and intergenerational patterns.
And therefore, any effective solution, any real breaking the cycle, has to operate on all those levels too.
That seems to be the core promise. High-leverage interventions in policy, in system design or logistics, and in how we support individuals contextually and psychologically.
You can't just fix one part in isolation.
Probably not, no. Changing policy might not work if people are too stressed or overwhelmed to take advantage of it, and individual effort alone is often crushed if the system itself is fundamentally stacked against you.
So the big takeaway here, even without reading the source, is that understanding the nature of the cycle is step one. Is it primarily about debt, about low income, about vulnerability to unexpected shocks?
Right, because the how to break it part really depends on how you define it.
And that connects back to why we do these deep dives, doesn't it? Even defining the problem clearly is a huge part of learning and finding solutions. The title itself frames the challenge.
It absolutely does. It tells you this is seen as a complex system, not just a series of unfortunate events. And that requires a systemic solution.
So let's turn this back to you, the listener. We've unpacked the promise of this title. Now think about it for yourself.
Yeah, what does that phrase, a cycle of financial struggle, actually mean to you? When you hear it, what comes to mind first?
Do you tend to think about the psychological aspects, the stress, the decision-making under pressure?
Or do you immediately think about the bigger picture? The systemic stuff, wages, costs, lack of opportunity, policy failures?
And maybe the most important question the title raises, what does your definition imply about where the solutions lie?
Is breaking the cycle primarily about individual responsibility, changing habits, getting more disciplined?
Or is it more about collective action, advocating for those big policy changes, fixing the systems that seem to create these traps?
The structure we've inferred today suggests the most powerful answer is probably, well, somewhere complex. It's likely at the intersection, where individual capacity gets boosted by a genuinely supportive environment.
That's a really powerful place to leave it, thinking about that intersection.
Definitely food for thought.
Thank you for digging into the architecture of this question with us, even without the full text. We encourage you keep thinking about these ideas of cause, effect, and system change inherent in breaking the cycle of financial struggle.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.